Let's look at the future values program. So what I did, I opened the future values program um, immediately, and I kind of did this before the video started. It's the future values W. I put a W on there working so I don't ruin the copy of future values, because we're going to make some changes, and that's always advised to keep keep a backup of the original, especially if you're working with pre-existing sections of Python code. So I look at the top of it, and I see with the standard shebang. There I see one function here at the top, and it's calculate future values. So it gives you some calculations. I go down here, and I see a main function, and I see this here to tell it to use the main function if we're running it in the actual module itself, which we will be. Let's give a run to kind of see what this does. Run it. Wants us to enter a monthly investment. We're going to say, let's say 200. Enter a yearly interest rate. We say 7 for 20 years. Hey. Then he asks to do it again. We're going to say yes. Monthly investment 0. Yearly interest rate 7. And for 20 years. Okay. Investment 0. That does work. Later they're going to ask us to make an actual value there, do some validation to make sure we have the values entered that would do a correct range. And I'm going to say no. So we're going to exit it now. What they asked us to do is go ahead and produce maybe a outline of the flow of the flow of the program, and I just did a quick outline for that, and they wanted us to breeze through the rest of the exercise and throw a couple of functions they're going to ask us to add that currently don't exist, and they're going to ask us to add it later. They said a hierarchy chart or outline. Personally, I really only use charts if it's a monstrous program, just a really large program, or I'm giving some sort of presentation about the program that I need people to see big, big puffy blocks, nice to see things. On the smaller and simpler programs, I usually just do an outline. So I got the existing program, and it starts with the main. I should probably do this. I'm just using this to indicate this function, and you could do whatever kind of style best suits you, that you could recognize as a function call, or you could even write get float afterwards this function. So the main idea and our main plan for the program is to, when we do add these new functions, to we'd call get float to get the first float, get float again to get the second float, and get int to get the integer, which will be the number of years. Then run it through the existing calculate future values function, print out those values, and then either exit the program or repeat. Let's go back up to the top and do it again, because if we look at the program, it's basically it's in a giant while loop, and it's going to go on and on and on, and until someone decides to finally exit the program, or just turns the program off, aborts it. But that's beyond our control if they turn off the program or turn off the PC. But within the flow that we do control in our logic, we have this while loop that can be broken by typing in there. So this is just kind of an overview of, with our changes, how we want to go about doing this. Now, we're going to actually start to go about doing this. So the first step is they ask us to create a function called getFloat. So we're gonna go right up here, right under the shebang statement, and we're going to define a new function. We're going to call it getFloat, and we're gonna pass it a value, and you see later on, if you skipped ahead and read all the things they want us to do in this exercise 4.1, eventually they want us to add more parameters, but for the first go around, it just add one parameter. Okay, and we're going to call that prompt. Oops. Let me indicate this function, and there we go. Idle immediately knew it was a function now with the colon, and it automatically indented it for me. So within this function, we're gonna have a while loop to kind of catch making sure the number is greater than 0. What they want us to do is they're asking us in there to determine if we have a greater than 0 value. So we're going to go while true, and then we're going to be in our next loop, and we're going to say number equals float, and you can see what we're doing is we're moving up some of the stuff that was done in the main into the actual function. So what number equals float, and we have a input prompt. Okay, so I'm having an input prompt, the value we've got in for it. So basically, when this function is done, it's going to take from the main program just the value of what they want displayed on the screen, like enter number X or enter number Y, or basically whatever is passed to it. And we're going to say if that number, after the number is entered, and the condition they want us to look for greater than 0. So if it's greater than 0, oops, let me go here, need to add the greater than sign. So if the number is indeed greater than 0, we're going to say is valid equals true. So we're going to set a value to true, and we're going to return number. Okay, so what's going to happen here is that it's going to exit out of the loop and return the number that we have, but we're going to use else to kind of a catch-all other condition. Else, we're going to print out to the screen a message saying that, hey, you did not enter a value, a valid number. It's not greater than 0. So entry must be greater than 0. And then we're going to say, please try again. Okay, that sounds good. Okay. So basically, what we have is if we use the get float, it starts a loop that's going to go on forever until someone enters a number that's greater than 0. And when that does happen, it's going to basically go out of the loop and return the number. Now that we have this function defined, we're going to have to try to use it. So let's go back down here to where they're doing this, and they're using an input and then forcing it to a float, and they have a tab in there to tab it out a little. But let's make a change here. We're going to go here, and what do we call our function? We call the get float. So we're going to go get float, and let's make sure we pass it something. Okay, and we only have to pass it one thing, which is the prompt, and the actual function is going to take care of all this rest of the stuff that's going on. It's going to do the float and the import, and then also some of the other validation that we added. Okay, get that going here. Believe that looks good. Later they're going to ask us to kind of do the same but for the integer. So let's look at our function, and it looks like we have things good. Or we're gonna find out very shortly once we attempt to run it. So let's try to run this. Okay, no errors there. Monthly investment, let's go for $200. Monthly interest rate, 0. Let's see what happens. Oh, it catches us and says must be greater than 0. Please try again, which is good. Our function is working. So we're going to put 7. Number of years, let's go for 20 years. And everything looks like it's working. We have our validation to catch the greater than 0. We move that out from the actual main program to a separate function where we can determine how to do validation on float. So everything is thus far looking good. Now we've been asked to improve upon our function. They want us to add 2 more parameters, a high and a low value for the validation. Currently, the function, if you look at it, is kind of hard-coded just to look for 0, and they want to be able to change that. So the first thing we need to do if we're going to add new parameters is put them here in the definition. Here we're going to call them low and high. So eventually we're going to get these in for a low and a high value. We're going to keep the main while true loop here, And we're also going to keep this line the same, where we're inputting based on whatever prompt they gave us. But here's where we're gonna differ, because now we're gonna have two more parameter values to work with. So we're gonna say where number is greater than low, and we could pass it 0 as low once we get there, and we say and number is less than or equal to high, which would be the high value passed. And the rest here should be good. Here we probably want to make a change, because you see how it's kind of in there and saying greater than 0, which might be the case, but what if we someone decides to enter 1 as the low value? So we're gonna make a quick change here. Go with than, and we're gonna put the actual low value out there. And I'm gonna use some verbiage here. 1 second. And so we have and less than or equal to, let's put the high value. Okay. Go high. And if that's not there, we say please try again. So what do we have here? Let's give a quick peek. So it's going to print entry must be greater than, and then we're going to say the low value, and less than, or looks like I have a misspelling here. Okay, less than or equal to, and then we have the high value. Please try again. That looks pretty good. Okay. So now let's go down to where we're calling it, and let's give a for the first one, monthly investment. We're going to say $0, and give them the most that we want. Let's pick in 1,000. Looks like the text says enter enter a 1,000 for this, so we're going to do that. And for the interest rate, they suggest that we do a 0 and a 15. So basically we have the same function, but we changed it. It now accepts multiple parameters, 3 of them, and does some validation based on that. So we're going to run this. And it's going to say monthly investment. What happens if we put 0? Okay, it says what we wanted to must be greater than 0 and less than or equal to 1,000. Please try again. So we're going to say 200. Interest rate -2. That's kind of actually -1. That's not in the valid range of 0 to 15. So it says try again. So we're going to go 7. And number of years, 20. Okay, it looks like our program works with the new validation that we added to the function by adding the 2 extra parameters. Okay, now next it looks like they're going to ask us to add a int function. So we have a get float. We need to add a get int function, and it's going to be very similar, but with the integer to get the integer value. So let's look at that. So we're going to try to get the number of years now. So what we're going to do is we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we want to try to use what we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that function down again, and I'm going to change it. And instead of get float, it is now get int. Looks like there's going to be some other changes we're also going to have to do. We need a prompt, a low and a high, and of course over here this is going to be an integer, not a float. And pretty much everything else should really be the same. Now we're going to have to go down to where we're going to call it, and we can get rid of the end and the input because we're doing it now in the actual function. So let's go here, get rid of that, and go get int. So we're calling our brand new function that we wrote, and we have a fair number of parameters there, and let's see what they ask us to use as the parameters for this. Let's go for a 1 to 50. So we can let it go for 1 to 50 years, and that's quite a bit. Go 0 to 50. We're going to change it to 0 to 50. So we can do the 0 years. Okay, let's run this. I believe we changed everything we need to change. Oop, I'm going to space that out. Give it a space there. Okay. Monthly investment, -1. Oh, nope. It says no, we can't do that, which is good. We're gonna say $200. Yearly interest. Quite a bit, and says nope, can't do that. It's got to be 0 through 15, and we're going to put a 7. Enter number of years. Let's see, 100 years, and it's outside our range, so it should tell us that, and it does. 0 to 50 years, and we're going to use 20 years. And it calculated the value as we planned. Now that this is working okay, what they want us to do is keep the validation separate. So they want us to put it in its own module that we can use with the import. So what you need to do is basically copy out of here and use this in your own module. I'm going to just cut that because I actually already set that module up. Now, instead of defining the code here, we know we have another module with it. So we're going to go import validation, and that's the name of it. Whatever you want to call it, as let's just call it val. I like that. So we're going to say import validation as val. So we renamed it to val. We could have just put input validation, in which case when we try to use a function from it, we'd have to type in validation, but we just need to put val. Okay. Now, I want to look really quickly at what we do have set up in val. So we're going to say open that. So here is the validation, and remember this is the code we made earlier for the actual functions is here. I added some another main function here to run. If we run it from here, it just basically calls our functions with some parameters. Doesn't really do much. Really, it just kind of tests our validation. We could run it real quick. Okay, it says enter a number. We're going to say 7, and that's valid. Enter an integer. Let's go mine. Oh, that says not valid because it doesn't hit a range. There we go. And we're going to exit that. Okay. So when we're in the actual module that we made, it's going to recognize it with this statement here, and then it's going to run this, which is just a simple validation. You could have it then really not do anything. You don't have to have it print or do anything. It could be very blank, but it's a good place for your testing when to have it, do some when you're actually in there. But the neat thing is that when we have it out there, we have it in the directory we're going to run this from. Python's going to be able to find validation, import it in, and give it a nickname or alias of val, and let us use these functions. So now we're going to close it, and we're going to make sure we have everything called right. Yep, looks good to me. We called it val based on the alias that we gave up here. So let's run this. Okay. It says enter monthly investment. Let's give it a bad number, and it catches us. Let's go for the 200 yearly interest rate. Let's also give it something that's unacceptable. It says no. Let's give it a 7 interest rate. And it gave us an error. Interesting. It says get int is not defined. Let us check that out. Now let's examine the program closely. It's saying get int is not defined. We ran get float twice, and get int we had issue with. Now it looks like Python wasn't sure where to find that function because we didn't specify in front of it where to find it. In the past, or earlier on, when we initially created this program, we had the function right within the program itself, and it had it available to use. But now if we need to make a function available, we have to tell Python that it's in this module, and we call val. We did an alias val's quicker. So now if we run the program again, we should have a little more luck. Okay, enter monthly investment. We go $200. Interest rate 7 in number of years, which was given us issue in the past. We're going to say 20. And now that we told Python where the getInt function is located, it's able to run it correctly.